to your midnight book club. Tonight, we continue our long and strange journey through encounters by DW Pasulka, experiences with non-human intelligences, explorations with UFOs, dreams, angels, AI, and other dimensions. Now, we're on chapter 6 now. It's called Gnosis, which means knowledge, the knowing. We're going to learn all about the history of the weird tonight, Rosicrucianism, Alan Hynek, Jacques Vallée, two favorites of mine. So far in this journey, we've encountered gray aliens, also encounters with none other than Saint Michael himself, strange orbs in the sky, the Vatican Observatory and its secrets, the secret order of the Dolphin, a group of scientists, including Carl Sagan, who are trying to find a way to communicate and speak the dolphin language. We've learned about a space psychologist who delves into the minds of astronauts who've seen some strange shit. And then we've met demons in the dark, people who've encountered dark entities who think they're out to get them, including the story of Nobel Prize winning material scientist, and I'm getting the picture right now, Kary Mullis, the dude who found like the polymer's chain reaction or something like that, won a Nobel Prize and the Japanese Science Award for it. Late one night outside his property in Mendocino, he sees what he claims is an electric raccoon. He's walking on his property, shining his flashlight around. He sees this little light creature underneath the tree. He shines his light at it. The creature looks at him and goes, "Hello, doctor." That's the last thing he remembers. He wakes up fully in his clothes, all dry, which is weird because usually it's dewy out there in Mendocino. And he's walking up his hill. He doesn't remember anything else, but he remembers that. It infuriated him. He returned to his he returned to the place where he saw the raccoon, shot it up. So those are the types of encounters we've been reading about. Tonight we're delving in, like I said at the top, a history of the weird. We're gonna learn about a sect of Christianity, I guess you would call it, called Rosicrucianism, or we're going to learn about it. And we're going to learn about the history of Jacques Vallée and Alan Hynek, two of my favorite ufologists. So without further ado, let's just get right on into it. Welcome on in. This is chapter 6, entitled Gnosis. We always start with a quote on these chapters, which is awesome. It's just like in Dune, the science fiction book. You always get a quote from Princess Aurelian at the top. This is a quote from Kuyon Yamada. "The practice of Zen is forgetting the self in the act of uniting with something, anything, it does not matter. What it is, for the act of forgetting the self is the act of enlightenment." So there you go. Get deep in on anything. You're feeling it. You're feeling the oneness. January 9th, 1999, Las Vegas. Jacques Vallée records a meeting of scientists and interested parties who discuss day-after scenarios of potential extraterrestrial contact. Standing before a full board, Kit, the only missing member, Bob Bigelow, went over the history of our efforts, UFO disclosure, from the initial intent to the appeal to the military to the more recent idea of having our own contingency plan if it turned out, as he put it, we are cohabiting Earth with non-human entities that controlled our destiny. John Alexander, who knows the world, observes that our scenario discussions start from a first world context, yet there are some cultures that accept contact already as something that has happened. And those, of course, are we've mentioned those cultures a lot during this reading, all the indigenous cultures of the world, or a lot of them. I mean, I don't know fart about doink. So what I mean is a lot of indigenous cultures that we've read about from this book, they just believe in contact with other entities already, and it's part of their practice of culture or religion. And so, I mean, even in the Catholic religion with saints and all that good stuff, people practice contact with these entities. So that's what they're talking about. Mainly indigenous cultures, the West and colonizers, whatever you want to call them, we kind of came through and we've forgotten that connection to nature. And this book's a lot about that. If you want to check it out, the other videos, the other chapters, they're up on the YouTubes. Anywho, let's continue. All right, so here we are at this conference of like the coolest ufologists. Jacques Vallée, this guy Jean Alexander, Bob Bigelow, if you know, is of fame of one of the guy who worked with one of the Blink-182 dudes. So all sorts of UFO disclosure superstars here are at this meeting. Jacques notes that Alexander knows the world. Other cultures, including cultures within the United States, have accepted and believe that there are non-human intelligent beings in contact with people and even have some control over human destiny and history. Even within the United States, millions of people, including military and military personnel with clearances, believe this. Tyler D., who is a top scientist at NASA, one of their mission controllers. Tyler D. is the pseudonym that the author uses for him, bases it off Tyler Durden from Fight Club, because he's like an edgy, cool scientist that has special privileges because he's so good at his job, kind of gets to do what he wants. He was working with Pasulka for a long time, kind of revealing to her what he could about the UFO program and the space program. So that's who Tyler D is. He's one of the people who believe that we are in contact with entities, whether they be, they're non-human intelligences and they're from somewhere and they have some play in human destiny. So that's what we're talking about. Tyler D., whose affiliations and insider military status exceeds any of the people represented within Jacques' cohorts of scientists, believes he is in contact with non-human intelligence related to the UFO phenomenon. What Bigelow and Jacques' cohorts hoped for was recognition from the United States military that they are in contact with potential extraterrestrial visitors or non-human intelligence. While not mocking this cohort's efforts, Jacques shed light on his opinion that at the time about possible disclosure of anything from the United States military, which he acknowledges is, at least in the early 21st century, held within the United States intelligence communities. So this is Jacques' opinion about waiting for disclosure from the government. To my surprise, even educated people and business minds are now ready to believe that the ultimate truth, consigned to deeper recesses of the intelligence community, will soon be released on the appropriate schedule through well-chosen intermediaries. From my own viewpoint, sitting on a steep hill of unidentified cases, which my current history begins to explain, the only reasonable attitude is that of frater in vino veritas, as I now call Fred Beckham, who advises me to sit back and enjoy the show. That's all we can do. That's just good advice on life, I feel like. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Try and be happy. The show continues as the Pentagon now releases yearly reports about UFOs from a public who, for the most part, either doesn't care or already believes or disbelieves in UFOs. Frater's attitude toward this is probably the wisest. Meanwhile, people continue to report experiences of contact with non-human intelligent beings, something that has been and continues to be part of culture from the beginning of human history. What if the story, as it turns out, is not about handing over the reins of the narrative of disclosure to a superpower, but about acknowledging what has been known all along? Spontaneous exorcism. Sorry. Spontaneous esotericism. So we're going to get a little philosophical here, so buckle up. We're going to get a little wonky, learn about words, fun stuff like that. So Jose, we're diving back into Jose. He's the military man we met last chapter. You can go watch that if you'd like to. Has had encounters with UFOs and other entities from other dimensions or whatever it may be all of his life. Jose's UFO experiences are similar to many people's experiences and also reflect a spiritual orientation that is difficult to describe because it is not formalized by traditional religious categories. The closest framework I would use would be to identify it as a form of esotericism. In its most general sense, esotericism as knowledge which is specialized or advanced in nature, available only to a narrow circle of enlightened or initiated or highly educated people. Scholars of esotericism identify three models of esoteric traditions: an enchanted worldview with ancient roots but flourishing in the early modern period, a wide array of occult currents and organizations that emerged after the Enlightenment as alternatives to traditional religion and rational science, a universal inner spiritual dimension of religion as such. But what is esotericism? Good question, DW. One way I explain esotericism to my students is that it is a tradition of the transmission of special knowledge in popular culture. The Jedi tradition of Star Wars is an esoteric tradition. Okay. The object that gets transmitted is gnosis, which in Greek means to know. Back to the title of the chapter. In an experiment, to know in an experiential way, as opposed to an informational way. The difference between informational knowledge and experiential knowledge is like the difference between reading the ingredients on a chocolate bar package as opposed to tasting the bar. Tasting the bar of chocolate is having a Gnostic experience of chocolate, whereas reading the ingredients amounts to learning about the chocolate bar through information. Esoteric knowledge is spiritual knowledge that has been hidden from most people and transmitted to those who are initiated into it. It is, by definition, an elite form of knowledge preserved for those who are smart enough or privileged enough to be its recipients, or so it has been thought. That's right, because knowledge should not be locked behind anything. Could Jose's UFO encounters be understood as Gnostic experiences outside of an established esoteric tradition? When Jose sees UFOs, he considers them to be spectral messages and gifts. He doesn't view them within the militarized narrative that understands them as space vehicles from other galaxies driven by anthropomorphized extraterrestrials. Instead, he views them as numinous spiritual encounters. In my research, I met many people who, like Jose, interpreted their UFO encounters as a form of spontaneous esotericism that effortlessly flowed from their own spiritual practices and not from an institution or school. That's right. Build up. It's all about building up your own knowledge and then just using it however you see fit. That's okay. We don't have to go far to find esotericism and UFOs within the American study of UFOs. Alan Hynek, ooh, yes, welcome. Welcome, Big Daddy Hynek. So Alan Hynek here, one of my faves, this cutie, he was the original Project Blue Book scientist hired by the Air Force to study UFO encounters. You can see him here holding up a UFO picture. This kind of looks like when he was a skeptic. He started off as a skeptic, was out to debunk all these different sightings. He turned out to be one of the most hardcore believers and thought that this was something that the United States government needed to look into and needed to disclose to the public. He, of course, was, shut out, and the government was like, hey, you know what? Project Blue Book, let's get another group of scientists to look at it. And that's where you get a lot of the explanations today, where most things are explained away as like people are, hallucinating or swamp gas or whatever it may be. So that's Hynek was the OG scientist. And we'll find out the OG captain of the weird, along with his protege, Jacques Vallée, this guy right here, another one of my favorites. So Jacques Vallée was actually the, what would you call that, advisor to Steven Spielberg for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So if you haven't seen that, it's a great alien movie that's got a lot of alien truth to it, apparently. So Jacques Vallée is a top dog scientist who's been studying UFOs for a long time as well. He worked under Alan Hynek. Hynek and Vallée engaged in the study and practice of the esoteric tradition Rosicrucianism. And that, all I found that when I looked it up, I found this on Google. So this is a Rosicrucian temple or picture. Looks like a gnarly form of Christianity or something. Let's learn about it. Significantly, they both believed that they didn't have to be initiated into the school, but that they could practice it outside of the institutional affiliation. Their ufology, furthermore, cannot be separated from their esoteric practices, just as Jose's experiences cannot be separated from his greater view of an enchanted world filled with real demons and angels in spiritual battle. I learned firsthand about Jacques Vallée's engagement with the tradition one afternoon while I was in San Francisco for some presentations. Jacques had invited me for lunch at his apartment. His apartment was in a beautiful high-rise building that appeared to be the tallest in the neighborhood. As I walked through the door, I was immediately struck by the panoramic view that spanned the distance from San Francisco to Oakland and Berkeley, and then to the north, Marin County. It was the most spectacular view of the Bay Area I had ever seen, and I have seen many. My earliest memories are from my childhood in San Francisco. Jacques was a gracious host. We had an informative conversation. During my visit, Jacques gave me a tour of some of the tomes of early ufology. I saw the handwritten and typed minutes of Project Blue Book. Oh, that'd be so cool to see. That's like a holy document. There were other minutes from conferences, photographs of esoteric rock stars from the 70s, and beautiful statues that Jacques had acquired from his fieldwork and global escapades. I was also privileged to see his special library, which was an inner sanctum within his apartment. The sanctum was framed by beautiful stained glass windows that Jacques had created himself with the help of expert craftspersons from the Chartres Cathedral in France. Chartres Cathedral is a very important center for Catholic thought and practice, but it is also a sacred destination for practitioners of Rosicrucianism. The Rosicrucian tradition is most likely began as an esoteric spiritual practice comprised of burgeoning scientists of the 17th century, practitioners of the esoteric order. However, identify the tradition as much older than this and even claim that it has roots in Egyptian religion and culture. The pursuit of knowledge was a very dangerous endeavor during the 17th century, especially if it appeared to displace or contradict the knowledge edifices that reinforced the status quo and the power of the Catholic Church, which ruled most of Europe at the time. One group of these esoteric scientists dubbed themselves the Invisible College, as they intended to carry out their scientific pursuits in secret. Allen Hynek repurposed the term in the 1970s for his small group of scientists, including Jacques. In reference to his 17th century predecessors in the Invisible College, Jacques wrote, "They were occultists because their innermost thoughts had to be kept hidden from those who would have persecuted them. But theirs was the opposite of an occult endeavor. It aimed at greater light, openness, and freedom." And if you remember, a couple weeks ago, we read about the Gray Man and his encounters with gray aliens and creatures that seemed like demons, and how he studied Aleister Crowley and Parsons. Parsons, of course, being the father of rocketry, Crowley being a wild occultist was said to have talked to a demon race called the Thelma, who look a lot like gray aliens. Anywho, they practice in the dark to help Parsons get rocketry off the floor. Apparently, that's what they said. And when the Gray Man studied it, being a top scientist in Australia, top materials scientist, Gray Man is just a pseudonym for the book, he says a scientist wouldn't do some gnarly occult ritual like that unless it freaking worked. So these guys were more working in the dark. You can imagine Jacques Vallée and Hynek as more working in the light, I guess, as from Vallée's own words. As I admired the stained glass windows, Jacques explained the intricate process of creating stained glass and elaborated on the meaning of the images that he placed in the glass windows. It was amazing to me that the stained glass windows Jacques had crafted in Chartres, France, were here, stories high and towering above San Francisco. As I marveled, I turned my gaze towards stacks of books that were obviously very old. My work has taken me to some of the most famous and wonderful libraries and archives in the world, and I recognized the special quality and nature of the books before me. They looked rare and were likely original printings. Ooh, that would be so nice to go explore that library. Jacques first pointed to one wall of books and pulled of them from the shelf to show me. It was a book about angels. I didn't touch it as the oil in my fingers might have injured the pages, but Jacques flipped through the book to show me some illustrations. He put the book back. What was most important, I gathered, was not the particular book, but the fact that the wall of books so high and so full was about one subject, angels. This wall of books, I gathered, comprised a history of angels. We took a few steps towards another wall of books. Again, my eyes followed the tall stack before me that reached all the way up to the ceiling. Another wall of books. Again, Jacques repeated the same steps, almost as if he had done this many times before. And I was doing what probably other people had done before me, which was stand there and look in awe. This book, the new one he picked out, was also about angels. There was a very big difference, however, from the previous book. This one was about fallen angels. Again, in wonder, I stepped back to take in the enormity of what was before me. A bookcase of maybe hundreds, maybe more, of books about fallen angels. Jacques made a joke, which may have been prompted by the look on my face. I didn't remember it word for word, but I think he said, well, you can't have one without the other. It's just like being so coy. This is a guy who knows almost all the secrets about UFOs, and he's showing you books about about fallen angels and not talking about UFOs. It's just really interesting. It's like, what does it mean? It's almost like, the deeper you go, the more you believe. I don't know. Jacques then walked me to a place that looked like a special table. Maybe it was the desk where he wrote. On it were several large books or manuscripts. I couldn't tell. He explained that these were Rosicrucian texts that had belonged to Allen Hynek, and which were received upon Hynek's death. These were obviously placed in a special place in the library. I could feel their sacred character. Jacques said that they contain Hynek's own notes and underlined passages. He also told me that these were important during the time of Hynek's passing. It was a very poignant few moments, and we stood in silence in that small room. I could feel the bond between these men. After the tour of the inner sanctum library, I felt different than when I had walked into Jacques' apartment. The visit was not what I had expected. As we sat for some refreshments in front of the window with the long view of San Francisco, Jacques asked me what we learned from Tyler D. I had introduced him to Tyler, and we all very briefly worked together. When he asked the question, I wasn't sure what to say. Whatever I said must have been disappointing to him, as the conversation didn't continue in that direction. As we neared the time of my departure, Jacques reached toward the coffee table, on which he displayed a delightful array of pastries and a book. He picked up the thick book and showed it to me. He said to me, I highly recommend that you find this book and read it, he said. I know, I went looking for this book so hard after this. Some people on Reddit found it, but it's fucking sold out everywhere, of course. I will do that as soon as possible, I thought to myself. He handed me the book. The title was A History of Satan. This was surprising, of course. More surprising still was that Jacques divulged that the authors were an order of nuns. I believed he said they were Carmelite nuns. The book was written in the 1800s, and Jacques said it was an excellent work of scholarship. I was very confused at this point. Where are the books about UFOs, I thought, as I turned my head discreetly and looked around. But I knew and trusted Jacques. I was too alarmed to ask any relevant questions, like, why was I supposed to be reading about the history of Satan? But I didn't ask that question much later, to my regret. Jacques then opened the last page of the book and said, these nuns had quite the sense of humor. The last page was numbered 666. What impressed me was the high level of scholarships the Sisters of Carmel applied to their subject, Jacques said, and how they treated it with intelligence and humor. None of the tabloid-like theatrics in which the devil is misrepresented in America. We laughed as we bid goodbye, and my friends picked me up in their car. As I settled in the car and buckled my seatbelt, my friends asked me about my lunch with Jacques. On the surface of it, I had a nice lunch, and we enjoyed a friendly conversation. We directly influence history and culture development. Wrong one. We all thought I was there to discuss the topic of UFOs. Instead, I was encouraged to read up on angels and fallen angels. I didn't tell them that part, though. I had to think more about it, and that would take some time. Later, when I read about Allen Hynek's Rosicrucianism, I was able to make sense of that meeting. And still later, I realized that I did have an answer for Jacques. I did know what we learned from Tyler. Jacques had published a collection of journals called Forbidden Science. The journals are a rich source of data, not only about his research methods and the history of modern ufology, but offer important insights into his own understanding of spirituality and esotericism. I ordered volume 1 of that, so get ready, folks. Boop, boop, boop. We're going to get to read that too eventually on the book club. But it gets into all his own esotericism. UFO folklore and research is often mired with interpretive frameworks of secrecy and conspiratorial accusations. This makes sense. One considers that certain esoteric traditions like Rosicrucianism arose to protect the most innovative members of society, scientists, who were often called occultists and witches, and sometimes suffered a similar fate as those people did. Within this context, it is understandable how knowledge of UFOs, which is thought of by many people to be known about only by secret government societies, has come to be associated with esoteric tradition. Scientists on the edge of innovation had to work in secret to survive. Their science was literally forbidden. According to Jacques, he and Alan Hynek were non-denominational Rosicrucians. That is, they didn't affiliate with any specific branch or lodge. Throughout his journals, Jacques acknowledges his esoteric roots and their place within the Rosicrucian tradition. So it sounds like it's like a thing that has different sects, okay? And they were just like, oh, we just do our thing. That's all I'm about. Just find the knowledge, do your own thing. You don't have to join anything. While also noting that this knowledge is free for anyone who wants to engage in the practice to receive. It is not knowledge that is privileged. It is the context of the knowledge production that demanded secrecy. He indicates that the time may be ripe for free pursuit of this knowledge. It is this work, the only great work worthy of the name, which inspires me here as the sun rises over the meadow and the rare majesty of the redwoods. Pages from the Liber Mundi I yearn to read. The Liber Mundi is the World Book, or the Book of the World. Jacques mentioned that he and Hynek did not need to associate with an institution as the knowledge was available outside of institutional transmission to read this world book. I think when he says world book, he's talking about what we read in the last chapter, which is like the earth, the green, the earth's internet, the natural internet, the consciousness that connects every living thing, the oneness. I think that's what he's talking about. They do not, initiates into Rosicrucianism, do not need help on the path, but it is help of a different kind. Assistance in deciphering the great book of nature, which is not locked in some tabernacle or basement, but open and full of everybody, if only they took the trouble to read it. The great book of nature includes the appearance of UFOs. They appear as they do for Jose within the book of the world. Everyday reality for those who can see. The great book of nature includes the appearance of UFOs. That's the world, right? That's reality. Is that what she's talking about? They appear as they do for Jose within the book of the world. Everyday reality for those who can see. Dr. Aaron French, a scholar of esotericism, discussed the ufology of Alan Hynek as a form of esotericism. According to French, Hynek read an eclectic mix of Rosicrucian texts, including the works of the founder of esoteric tradition, Rudolf Steiner, and initiate Max Hendel's writings. Within these texts, Hynek was exposed to evolutionary model of spiritual development. Many of these texts suggest that the 20th century would be a time when humans would perceive a spiritual science by cultivating the practice of meditative thinking. That's kind of going on, right? The esoteric books within Hynek's libraries reference collaborative work with etheric beings on spiritual planes. Beings on the astral plane directly influence history and culture developments. French also said that Hynek had underlined a specific quote by Steiner about how the practice of esotericism would prepare one for recognizing an angelic presence. French said that there were Rosicrucian texts that had been very important to Hynek. Toward the end of his life, one of these texts is referenced in Forbidden Science, Volume 4, by poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. It had been edited by Hynek. In his chamber all alone, kneeling on the floor of stone, prayed the monk in deep contrition. Suddenly, as if it lightened, an unwonted splendor brightened, all within him and without him, in that narrow cell of stone. Light comes from within, happiness from within, even in a narrow cell of stone. It can be done. As I listened to French's Cork University presentation on Hynek's work, I recalled my meeting with Jacques, his gesture towards Hynek's texts, and us standing among the tall bookcases filled with the Western history of angels, both fallen and presumably alight. As a scholar of religion, I know a lot of people whose life works is the study of specific forms of angelology, the study of angels, and one in particular has given some fascinating presentations on Christian monks and nuns whose cells light up while they are immersed in prayer. This reference to Longfellow's monk was clearly a nod to this tradition of angelic visitation, and perhaps what Hynek had hoped to encounter through his spiritual preparations. Probably that's what I want to encounter, dude. I want to encounter a being. I gotta like raise my vibe. I gotta meditate. I gotta get there. Gotta get there. We will. Okay. Woo! Let's keep going. So let's sum up all of old Alan Hynek's ideas in one sentence, Mr. French. The etheric or cosmic entities are now imparting a language that will bridge science and spirituality, French said of Hynek's beliefs. And this is backed up by books like Abduction, written by Dr. Mack, right? Who talked about everyone who he studied who had an abduction case, who this man believed, Harvard trained psychiatrist, he believed them all. They were given some sort of mission or some sort of new language to try and understand and decipher about the future. It's also a lot like the Andreessen affair. When Betty Andreessen was abducted, same thing. She was given like a message and a mission. Just very interesting connection. Hynek believed that to be the truth, that these entities were imparting knowledge onto us for some reason. Hynek and Rudolf Steiner believed in, and Hynek probably believed he had in his possession, materials that were mental and physical, spiritual and material. Hynek thought of some UFOs were benevolent space beings that helped us. They were potential future humans returning to us now through advanced technology. This is somewhat of a reverse reincarnation, a term that Vallée considered, French said, where instead of remembering past lives, we were able to pre-remember our future lives. Jacques appeared to advocate for the decentralization of esotericism of the invisible college. In Forbidden Science, Volume 4, he acknowledged precognition and the mistake made by many people who attempt to utilize it for a specific agenda. There is a level of spirit that hosts our higher faculties, engaged by the class of precognitive insight that occasionally flies us to a glimpse of the future. The mistake of occult groups isn't to affirm this knowledge, but to institutionalize it. They try to use it operationally on the wrong level. That makes me think of like remote viewers for the military and all that stuff, which is all real in the mechanics of consciousness and in the Cosmic Egg book. Oh my gosh, what's it called? Anywho, the book that proves precognition and not precognition, remote viewing and psychic abilities is real. Mind Reach by Targ and Puthoff. Another thing that proves that we have access to the unlimited, baby. He notes that a sincere inquiry into the nature of reality has produced spiritual scientific truths. This is the place I've reached in my own spiritual understanding, Jacques writes. As Alan did, I am guided by the certainty that there is another level of consciousness and undiscovered structures of reality, or rather meta-reality. It is that higher level that I've been seeking and occasionally been finding in meditation at Spring Hill under the night sky. Jose had been trained by the U.S. Marines to enhance his precognition as a survival skill. He identifies this ability as a consequence of being tethered to the organic network he identified as a soldier. Remember, like Telluride Chardin, the philosopher saint and warrior saint of World War I, they encountered what they said was this cosmic internet, this earth internet in a way, where everything is connected in oneness before we were connected by communication networks. The consciousness, nature's consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Some people, we're all able to connect to it. Some people are really sensitive to it. These skills can't be reproduced in laboratories, at least not in the levels required by mainstream science. Scientists need to bring the laboratories to the field. That is where the skills flourish, he said. I never liked the idea of reincarnation, but there's something that is somewhat akin to reincarnation referenced within the field of epigenetics, Jose said. Epigenetics is a growing field in which, though one studies factors that influence genetic expression without altering the structure of DNA. Scientists of the epigenome attempt to isolate elements that impact genetic expression in human behavior. Epigenetic research that has received attention within the past few years reveals that the trauma of one's grandparents can be passed on to future generations. Jose places the appearance of UFOs and spiritual beings as having impacts on the epigenome. Jacques expressed similar ideas in that he emphasized what he considered one of the most important aspects of the UFO phenomenon: their ability to influence people on a societal level. He emphasized that the symbolic nature of the UFO is as important, if not more so, than any physical or nuts and bolts aspect of the phenomenon. We tend to assume that the physical phenomenon is its most important aspect, that is, seeing the beings or being abducted by them, and that everything else is just a side effect and much less important, Jacques said. But perhaps we're facing something which is basically a social technology. Perhaps the most important effects of UFO technology are the social ones and not the physical ones. In other words, the physical reality may serve only as a kind of triggering device to provide images for the witness to report. These perceptions are manipulated to create certain kinds of social effects. Placing this idea within the context of epigenetics provides a new framework of interpretation, one that Jose finds helpful. To me, reincarnation is epigenetics, or activation of genes by way of histones through chemical tags. Epi, above, genetics, is the holder of our biological predecessors. Experiences to assist with the age-old cosmic battle of good versus evil. Epigenetics is cosmic intelligence, the consciousness coming in to give us a little kiss. To me, reincarnation is epigenetics, or activation of genes by the way of histones through chemical tags. Oh, said that already. Jose states that within our biological heritage, there is information that is passed down through generations that enables us to survive long enough to evolve a spiritual body. The traditions of philosophy and religion, from Plato through Aristotle and traditional religion, Jose explains, are social memes that allow humans to tether into the organic network, something much akin to the etheric network described by Alan Hynek's Rosicrucians. Platonic and Aristotelian ethical frames of epigenetic prescriptions, the philosophical and religious traditions, are prescriptions to allow this unseen, that is junk DNA, to sequence and guide us toward the omega point. Memes are social programs and UFOs like St. Michael, and images that describe an experience that is being had by millions of people. Told you, we are getting fucking deep and philosophical. If you could even have understood that paragraph, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my mind around it, and I've read it about 3 times now. I think basically what he's saying is that our genes have evolved to accept like a spiritual framework of connecting to the consciousness or to the world. The omega point is Chardin's term. Remember, Chardin, super cool warrior, World War I soldier. The death and destruction he saw on the battlefield, he said it made him see the Earth's network, how everything is connected. That feeling of samadhi that astronauts have talked about feeling when they see Earth from space, that feeling of oneness. The omega point is Chardin's term. It has been interpreted in various ways. It can refer to the point in the future when the Homo sapien lineage breaks off into a new branch and merges with a technological biological sphere. Or it can refer to human evolution that merges physiological and spiritual states. Jose equates the experience of seeing the Archangel St. Michael with the UFO encounter as a natural interpretation, a symbol for this coming shift. He identifies mental health as the most important resource people have today to withstand the natural social shifts. Mental health is about balance and epigenetic viability. Our predecessors lived through chaos and gave us the template to survive. Without proper protocols and philosophical or religious frameworks, there are bad experiences. Sadly, this is what we see today. The battlefield is both physical and virtual. There is no difference. What happens to people in virtual spaces impacts their physical and mental health. AI and machine learning can help reframe mental health. He was referring to social media and ubiquitous use of phones as creating bad experiences. Years ago, before the internet, Jacques Vallée warned that the use of new technologies advertised as products would feed off of human behavior. Humans essentially are the product, not their phones. Amen. Or computers. He restated these predictions as actualities in his 2010 essay, I, Product. What does it mean to live in a world where the behavior of an entire population can be accurately mapped out minute to minute, Vallée asked. A world where whole new social, political, or religious memes can be injected into the culture to mold into new forms. Perhaps people used to be up in arms when local authorities put fluoride into the water supply to strengthen kids' teeth, but very few object to intelligence agencies experimenting with massive social engineering intrusions into the flow of ideas on social networks. That's right. CIA and other agencies of other governments have their tendrils in everything. Every social network you use is being used by some government or the other to influence you and meme you out and change your mind. But, we just accept that because we love it. Vallée wrote about technologies as a means to consume human behavior, not necessarily as weapons. Jose teaches his students about the use of social apps as weapons, literal Trojan horses that appear to be gifts but cause physical damage externally to human environments and internally to human cognitive abilities. Within our borders and just a few miles outside, women, young and old, are kidnapped while working for factories serving Americans and their endless consumerism. After being violated, many of these women are then killed and then buried in the desert. Who is there to remember them? Their names, their stories, hopes, and dreams. I don't see that happening in the ghettos of America, Creekwood, or downtown. I don't see that happening, and Creekwood was where Jose grew up. I don't see that happening behind gated communities. Then there are families in cages, many of whom just wanted a better life, or were brought here because of farm work or for the promise of making money to send back home. The most valuable resource to the big players is data. However, the players understand that mind is the most critical resource needed to access data for their profits. So they have endless armies of bots, social engineers, algorithms to tap this resource, the mind. The mind is externalized into worlds today, and that makes us all targets. We inhabit these worlds. The battle space is these worlds. We're sitting in one of these worlds right freaking now. It's up to us to disrupt those operations. This is why mental health is so important. That's why right now what we're doing, guys, we're disrupting. We're having a good old time together. A nice family time reading by the hot tub. Virtual NPCs stop by. It's all good. We love them. Jose works with high school students. He disrupts the operations of tech warfare by teaching kids how to work out how to be alone, how to unplug from social media for just a little while, how to feel their bodies and their feelings. He teaches them how to be outdoors through biofeedback. He teaches them how to identify invasive feelings, how to redirect them. He created a platform that focuses on mental health to give young people a fighting chance against the armies of bots, algorithms, that are trained on the destruction of their self-esteem and their cognitive abilities. I've seen and heard Jose's lectures to college students. He provides statistics that back up how bad actors benefit financially, aka governments, bad actors, governments, benefit financially from the data offered up by millions, and bad corporations who want to take over and who have taken over. Anyway, they benefit financially by the data offered up by millions of young people's clicks. He reveals how they have created fake websites, fake jobs, fake people, sock puppet accounts to target vulnerable populations and to direct them to target other vulnerable people and populations. The old strategy of divide and conquer has been streamlined and is being used on civilians and trained on us. Jose's program focuses on the mental health of youth and veterans and teaches them to hook into the organic network, the one that predates the internet. This is the network that Jose became aware of as a young Marine in the war zone, and which he recognized he was always a part of. Digital natives, people born after the internet became available to almost everyone and who have never known anything other than being plugged in, are not aware that there is another network because they have never felt it. Digital natives, my digital natives, if you are born into the internet, I feel sorrow. I'm sorry. It must make it much, apparently it makes it much harder to connect the organic network. Not that I'm getting there to be connected. I already live in the woods. I just got to go sit in the woods a little more. Maybe go sit cross-legged in the freaking creek, see what happens. But digital natives, that's the name. Must be much harder to disconnect for digital natives. Their bodies are their means of tethering in, so Jose's strategy is to wake them up to the fact that their bodies react to their technologies. The body as a tethering device to a world network, as Chardin described, is something that could be found in many religious traditions. And that one astronaut who was stuck between the moon and Earth, that's what he felt. He felt he was tethered to Earth and the Earth sensing device. Very cool. But the tethering device to a world network, as Chardin described, is something that can be found in many religious traditions. In a conversation with novelist Marie Musuki Mockett, whose work on Japanese culture and technology offers insights into non-dualistic ideas of technology, she described her experience of learning Japanese Buddhism. When I went to Ihiji, which is the head monastery of the Soto Zen sect in Japan, we were put through protocols. When I went, I had thought we would discuss the meaning of Zen, dumb American. But no, we were put through physical training and dietary training. That is the way you start if you want enlightenment. It does make one wonder what the human body actually is. A sensing device, a device for the spirit to flow through into the earth's consciousness. Oh! Just as the monks of Ahiji scrubbed their human body clean to enable it to receive the teachings, Jose's program focuses on the body and mind as a site of resistance. We need to create a field of resistance, Jose said. We need to help young people maintain their bodies and their gray matter, enough to resist the digitized weapons that are a constant onslaught today. Jose was born plugged in. What need has he for esoteric practices? He lives within an enhanced field of information. His UFO encounters, which he neither likes nor dislikes, are one part of the fabric of this ongoing story. It's all real. It's all here. Some people are experiencing wild things connected to the Earth's consciousness and the entities that are connected thereof and in other dimensions. And if you're interested in other dimensions, we read a really good book, The Mechanics of Consciousness. I have all those chapters up here too. But all about other dimensions, entities in other dimensions, all that good stuff. Let's end this chapter though, huh? In this deep exploration of the lives of experiencers, I realized that the answer to Jacques' question, what did I learn from Tyler? I learned that Tyler is a mystic. He utilized physical and monastic-like protocols to access a network wherein he acquired information and insights. And he interfaced with the phenomenon directly. He did this without any knowledge of esoteric traditions. As Jacques noted, and as Jose's life reveals, the knowledge is available for those who bother to look for it. Throughout my research of UFOs, I've received constant correspondence from wealthy investors and curious scientists from all over the world who want to access UFO data. For good reason. People want the data. They want to reverse engineer UFOs to create the next game-changing technology. I understand this motivation. The people with this, however, is the problem with this, however, is that it seems that the data doesn't come from just the physical parts. It seems to come from the human interface within the phenomena. This suggests that the data storage is not a computer database, but human beings. We have all the data. We got all the answers already inside of us, and probably particular types of human beings like mystics. And mystics are rare. They don't crash land in the New Mexico desert. Ooh! Let's train up. We got to become mystics, people. That is your Midnight Book Club for today. Thank you for joining me. It's been a wild ride. Next week, we're going to be reading about Moon Girl, Chapter 7. Moon Girl was one of the scientists who helped bring forth the current iteration of AI that we're all experiencing. So we're going to pick her brain and learn about what it's like interfacing with AI entities and her experiences with beings from beyond the pale. So join me next week for Midnight Book Club. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a wild ride. Chapter 6 was amazing. I love learning more about Hynek and Valet. I got to get my hands on some of those rare Rosicrucian books. We got to get weird, people. We got to get weirder and weirder and weirder. Okay? So I'll see you next week. Stop by. I stream Wednesday and Thursday mornings. I just stream video games. We could chat about anything you want, though. Any spooky stories. That's whatever it is, man. I want to hear it. And then Saturday nights is when we do Midnight Book Club. We have the discussion on Saturday nights where I read and we discuss for anyone who wants to. And then, of course, I make these videos to post for the Midnight Book Club. But thank you for stopping by. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I'll catch you all on the other time.